What if Donald Trump once again imposes tariffs on America's allies? Could we see a global trade crisis, with these nations turning against the U.S.? Let's imagine a scenario where America's closest partners take a stand and challenge the very policies that have defined U.S. trade for the past few years. This could change everything. The root causes of tensions. To understand how this scenario might unfold, we must first take a look at the relationship between the U.S. and its allies, and how it has changed over time. Under President Donald Trump's leadership, America's foreign policy, especially concerning trade, has become more aggressive and unilateral. Trump has imposed tariffs on a variety of goods from different countries, claiming that these measures would help protect American workers and industries. However, these actions have left many of America's traditional allies in a difficult position. From China to the European Union, Trump's America First trade policies have been met with resistance. Canada, Mexico, and Japan have all been targets of tariffs at some point or another. European nations have also felt the pressure, especially regarding steel and aluminum tariffs, and the threat of additional taxes on digital services. At the core of these decisions was Trump's belief that these nations were taking advantage of the U.S., while offering little in return. But is this approach sustainable in the long run? Could these allies continue to tolerate such treatment? This is where the tension begins to mount. While the U.S. has historically been at the center of the global economic system, these countries, many of which are key trade partners, may no longer want to play along. After years of being subjected to Trump's tariffs and aggressive trade practices, what if they decided enough was enough and began working together to fight back? How could nations respond? If Trump pushes his tariff policies even further, how might America's closest allies respond? We could start to see a drastic shift in global alliances. In the past, the U.S. had the upper hand in many international trade negotiations, often using its economic clout to shape global rules. But in this imagined scenario, that power might begin to slip. The EU, Japan, and Canada, each with their own interests at stake, could unite to oppose the tariffs in a way that directly challenges America's policies. One possible response is that the European Union could lead a coalition of Western democracies. As a bloc, the EU is the largest economic entity in the world, and its collective influence could make a significant impact on global markets. Rather than continuing to negotiate with the US individually, Europe might decide to take a more coordinated approach. The EU could start imposing retaliatory tariffs on US goods, focusing on key industries like agriculture, automobiles, and technology. This could create a tit-for-tat situation where both sides continually escalate the conflict, severely disrupting global trade. Similarly, Japan, one of America's closest allies in the Asia-Pacific region, could decide that enough is enough. After years of being caught in the crossfire of the US-China trade war and facing tariffs on key products, Japan could turn to its regional partners for support. The Japanese government may take a hard line against US trade practices and start negotiating trade deals with China or other ASEAN countries as a way of countering America's influence. Canada, which shares the longest undefended border in the world with the US, could find itself in a tough spot as well. However, if the tariffs continue to target Canadian exports, especially in sectors like timber, dairy, and automotive, Canada could decide to take a stronger stance. It could partner with Mexico to create a more unified front, further alienating the U.S. A possible alliance to counter the U.S. As the trade tensions continue to rise, we may start to see a unique global alliance form between the U.S.'s former allies. The European Union, Japan, Canada, and even Mexico could begin to move closer together. Not only are these countries economically powerful on their own, but by aligning with one another, they could create a counterbalance to America's trade power. This alliance could focus on economic retaliation, but it could also extend to diplomatic pressure on the U.S. The group might seek to challenge Trump's policies in international bodies such as the World Trade Organization, WTO, using their collective clout to build a case for why the U.S. is violating global trade rules. Together, they could work on reshaping trade norms to prevent further unilateral actions by the U.S. In this scenario, we could also see these nations looking to form stronger trade relationships with countries like China, Brazil, or India. These nations have historically been on the periphery of Western trade agreements, but if the U.S. continues its isolationist policies, these emerging markets might be more willing to strike deals with Europe and Asia. This could create a new world order where the U.S. is no longer the dominant economic player. Global consequences. The global consequences of this hypothetical trade war would be severe. While it may begin as a political or economic standoff, the ripple effects would extend far beyond the negotiating tables. We would likely see supply chains disrupted on a massive scale. American-made products would become more expensive for foreign buyers, leading to a drop in exports and losses for American businesses. At the same time, foreign products could become more expensive in the U.S., leading to inflationary pressures at home. The stock market would likely experience significant volatility. Investors, uncertain about the future of international trade, would likely pull back from markets. In a worst-case scenario, the world could enter a recession if the trade war continues to escalate without resolution. Moreover, the political impact could be just as far-reaching. In Europe and Japan, leaders who once relied on the U.S. as a primary trade partner might begin to push for greater autonomy in foreign policy, no longer willing to let Washington dictate global trade rules. This shift could destabilize international relations and lead to the formation of new alliances that bypass the U.S. Will Trump adjust his strategy? At this point, Trump would be faced with an incredibly difficult decision. With his tariffs causing economic fallout both at home and abroad, and with former allies now united against him, the pressure to change his approach would be immense. Would Trump continue down this path of confrontation, or would he reconsider his strategy to prevent further damage to the U.S. economy? In this hypothetical scenario, Trump may opt for negotiations. He could offer to reduce tariffs on specific industries or take a more strategic approach to trade policy. Alternatively, he might double down on his America First stance, confident that the U.S. economy can withstand the pressures of a trade war. Ultimately, the outcome would depend on whether Trump is willing to compromise or whether he's willing to risk a prolonged global trade crisis to assert his policies. While this is purely a hypothetical situation, it's one that could become a reality if Trump's trade policies continue to alienate key allies. What would happen if the world's major economic powers united against the U.S.? Could this lead to a new global order? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more insights on global politics and trade.